Section 8.7 is about the cost of homeownership, and this is part 1 out of 2 total parts. Whenever they refer to the down payment on a home, that's the money that you put towards the house. So in other words, towards the selling price of the house, and you do that on the day of closing. Whenever they refer to the mortgage, that's the actual loan amount that you are borrowing to afford the house. Points is a percentage of the mortgage. So typically, a lot of banks will offer you this option where if you can afford to pay a little bit more, if you can afford to pay points on that closing day, they will reward you with a lower interest rate, which will translate into smaller mortgage payments. 1 point is equal to 1% of the mortgage. And we're going to do some calculations when we hit example 2 with these points. Looking at example 1, it says the price of a home is $220,000. The bank requires a 20% down payment and 3 points at the time of closing. The cost of the home is financed with a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage at 7%. A, find the monthly payment excluding escrowed taxes and insurance, and then part B, find the total cost of interest over 30 years. So we're going to be using the same formula as we did to calculate our monthly car payments. So student loan monthly payments, mortgage monthly payments or bi-monthly payments, car payments are all that same formula where we have the negative exponent in the denominator. So I'm going to write it at the top of the screen. The monthly payment, I'll put PMT for payment, equals principal P, which in this case is the amount you've borrowed for the house, so it's the mortgage, times R, the interest rate you're charged, converted to a decimal, divided by N. N is the number of times you're making payments. So typically it's monthly payments, which means N will be 12, just like with the car examples in the previous video, divided by. Now, view an example might not show you these parentheses, but you do need to type parentheses around your denominator. So I'm going to use a bracket, but you're just going to hit the normal parenthesis button. 1 minus, inner parentheses, 1 plus, R over N, close the inner parentheses, and here's what I was referring to with the negative exponent, raised to the negative N times T. I'm going to make another curvy T for time in years that you're going to pay back the money, the time frame of the loan. So yeah, please keep in mind when you have a lot of stuff in the denominator, even though the view and example on the homework might not show it, you do need parentheses around the entire denominator. It will affect your final answer. So keeping this in mind, we said now in the context of these questions in this section, this principal P is the mortgage amount, how much you've borrowed that you're paying back and that the bank or whoever is loaning you the money is charging you interest on. So keeping that in mind, they did not give us the mortgage. They gave us the selling price of the house is $220,000. So step 1, we need to figure out how much we're going to borrow for the rest of the house, because it says we need to put down a down payment of 20%. So let's go ahead and calculate the down payment. So put D period P period to abbreviate down payment equals, if I convert 20% to just a pure decimal, I need to move the decimal point 2 hops to the left. So it's currently at the end of 20. So here we go. 1 hop, 2 hops makes it 0.20, or you could even just say 0.2. I'll just write 0.20 to represent the 20%. And the down payment is a portion of the selling price. Of means multiply. So I'm going to times it by the selling price. So I took the down payment percent times, I'm using parentheses for times, the selling price every time. So if they don't tell you literally what the down payment is, they just give you a percent, we need to calculate it like we're doing here. So our percent was 0.20 for 20% times the selling price was $220,000. So in other words, we're figuring out what is 20% of 220,000. And we just simply multiply that. You can do it in your head or the calculator. And we see that this is $44,000 is the down payment amount. Now, please don't let this deter you from buying a house. Everybody's different. The first step, if you're interested in buying a house, is you would go to a mortgage broker and they would tell you what type of a loan you qualify for. You might qualify for a first-time homeowners loan, an FHA, where you only have to put 3.5% down, which is way less than 20%. You might qualify for a VA, a veterans loan, where it's a 0% down payment, so no down payment is required. But here, yeah, this is a larger down payment of $44,000 for this particular homework question. Now, step 2. Now that I know what the down payment is, I can figure out what the mortgage is. In other words, how much we need to borrow, what's left to pay off the house. So I'm going to take the selling price and I'm going to subtract the down payment, which I'll abbreviate again, D period, P period. So the selling price, the house costs $220,000 minus, but we're putting down on the day of closing $44,000 of that $220,000. So I'm going to subtract the $44,000. And after I subtract $220,000 minus the $44,000 down payment, I'm left with $176,000 to plug into P, the mortgage P in the monthly payment formula. So 3 steps. And this is the worst case scenario that we started with. A lot of times the homework will just tell you what the mortgage is, in which case you can just jump right into this formula so you don't have to do all this extra computation stuff. So I'm going to rewrite this number up here because I'm going to need to erase here in a second. The mortgage P equals $176,000, how much we borrowed, and that way we can plug it right into that formula. And erasing to create some space. Okay, so step 3, we can finally figure out what the question wanted all along. The monthly payment. This is just the principal and interest only that you would pay for the mortgage if you got this house. So equals, we said to plug into P, the mortgage amount, which we calculated was $176,000, times R. Well, the interest rate you're being charged is the other percentage you see. So it's not the down payment. We don't need that percent anymore. It says the fixed rate mortgage at 7%. 7% is 0.07 when you convert it to a decimal. Because you move that decimal point 2 hops to the left again, and it becomes 0.07. All over N, because it's a monthly payment, all the N's, all 3 of them in the formula there will be 12. Close it up. Close up the parentheses, divided by a parenthesis or a bracket. 1 minus, parentheses 1 plus, another R over N, so another 0.07 over 12. It's always a negative exponent. Another N, so another 12, times the time frame of the loan. Well, it's a 30-year loan, according to the original question, and close your bracket. So again, for most of these types of homework questions, they will just tell you what the mortgage is, so you can just jump right into this step of plugging into the formula when that happens. So just like with the previous sections, the previous videos, I'm going to do the exponent first before I plug the whole thing into the calculator. So I'm going to do the negative 12 times 30, which gives me negative 360. Please keep in mind it's an exponent. I didn't have anywhere to write, so it's no longer floating in the air like it should be, but let's pretend my negative 360 is floating in the air because it does represent an exponent. Now it's just a matter of plugging it into the calculator and rounding it however the homework question specifies. So let's just go ahead and say that they want the nearest dollar. We'll go for. Plugging this in, we said we had 176,000 times, I'll just use the parentheses just like I wrote it on my paper. R was 0.07 divided by N was 12, close the parentheses, divided by for that main fraction bar. We said just use the normal parentheses for brackets, it means the same thing. So I'm going to use left parenthesis, 1 minus another left parenthesis, 1 plus R 0.07 divided by 12, close up the inner parentheses, the exponent button, there's that up arrow above the division key, so up arrow. Remember, for the exponent, you're going to use the negative symbol on the bottom row, not the subtraction button. So using that negative symbol, and we got 360 when we multiplied that exponent out. Right arrow key brings your cursor back down to ground level, and we had a right bracket, which I'll just use a right parenthesis above the 9 button. Feel free, if you want to use your left and right arrow keys, to skim through just to make sure everything looks good to go before you hit enter. And then the homework's going to go back and forth. Sometimes they want you to round to the nearest dollar, meaning the 1 spot. Sometimes they want you to round to the nearest cent, meaning obviously 2 digits out. So let's say that they wanted nearest dollar. So to round to the 1 spot, I look just 1 digit after. It's a 9, meaning the 0 is going to round up to a 1. So that's approximately $1,171 would be my monthly principal and interest payment alone. That's not including property taxes or homeowners insurance, which would be added to that monthly bill. So I'm going to write approximately, for rounding to the nearest dollar, we said we got $1,171. Again, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of putting these parentheses, some sort of parentheses around the denominator in the calculator. I get a ton of emails every semester where students, they did not see those parentheses in the view and example, so they didn't type them in the calculator. But that's the only way that we can let our calculator know that, hey, all of this stuff needs to be in the denominator, is by putting parentheses around it. So we absolutely need those parentheses around that whole denominator every time in the calculator, even if you do not see it in the view and example on the homework. Okay, so looking at B, find the total cost of interest over 30 years. Well, even though we're going to pay back the $176,000 we borrowed for the mortgage, the way that they make out, the bank or whoever is loaning us the money makes out, is by charging us interest, of course. And so by the end of the 30 years, we're going to end up paying a lot more than $176,000 that we borrowed back. Just think of the car examples in the last video. You saw how much interest alone accumulated with them. Well, now it's going to be even larger when you're dealing with such a costly item such as a home. So we're going to use the same type of formula is the good news, as we did in the car examples. The total interest equals, we're going to figure out what we paid. So you're going to take what you paid by the end of the 30 years in this case, and you're going to subtract from it what you borrowed, the principal. So if you think about it, this formula is still in sync from earlier in this chapter, because we're taking the whole amount we paid, which we called A, and we're subtracting the principal, what we borrowed, P, to get the interest, I. So what we paid, well, let's think this out. We're paying $11.71 for principal and interest of what we borrowed, times, it's a monthly payment, so we're doing it 12 times a year, times, we're doing it for 30 years, minus P, what we borrowed. Well, we borrowed $176,000. Was our mortgage. So multiplying that out, 1171 times 12 times 30. You want to have your calculator handy as usual. And you should be getting 421,560. We still have to subtract the 176,000 though from that. And after I do that, I'll have to write it off to the side because I'm running out of room as usual. But my final answer, $245,560. Wow. So let's think about these numbers and what they mean in the context of the original question. So this first number, 421,560, is what we paid. So even though we borrowed $176,000, when this loan is all said and done, we've paid way more than that back. We've paid over $400,000 back. So that means that the bank or whoever loaned us the money has really made out, because they got $245,560 off of interest from us. So that's what they charged us for loaning us the money in the first place. Now, obviously, you would want to look at different interest rates depending on where the market's at. 7% is a pretty high interest rate, like in this particular example. Example 2 says, Patricia and Marshall Martin wish to purchase a home selling for $249,000. They plan to obtain a loan from the bank. The bank requires a 15% down payment payable to the seller and a payment of 2 points payable to the bank at the time of closing. Part A, determine the Martins' down payment. Part B, determine the amount of the Martins' mortgage. And C, determine the cost of the 2 points paid by the Martins on their mortgage. So you might notice in some of these questions that we do get some extra information here or there. So we really want to make sure we understand what this vocabulary means. So starting with A, it wants the down payment. Well, we already did that in step 1 of part A on the last example. We said the down payment, I'll abbreviate it DP again, equals, it's a percentage of the selling price. So it equals whatever percent the question tells you for down payment, convert it to a decimal. Of means multiply, typically in math, of the selling price. So times it simply by the selling price. So for our example here, the percent of down payment is 15%. When you convert that to a decimal, you got to move the decimal point 2 hops to the left. So that's the same as 0.15. So 0.15 times the selling price of the home is $249,000. And for this particular loan, the bank is saying that they have to pay 15% of that cost. So 0.15 times 249,000 means that they would have to pay $37,350 on the day of closing before they get the keys to that house. Again, different types of loans that people qualify for depending on their own financial situation and depending on their credit score. So now looking at Part B, determine the amount of the Martins' mortgage. Be very careful with what they're asking you for in the homework because they go back and forth. The last example was actually a little bit more work because it wanted to know the monthly mortgage payment. That's a totally different question than just, what's the overall amount you're borrowing? What's the overall loan amount? Because it just says determine the mortgage. It doesn't say determine the mortgage's monthly payment. So that's good news for us because whenever it says determine the mortgage's monthly payment, that's when we have to use that big old formula like on the last slide with the negative exponent. We don't need to do that here. If it's just the overall mortgage amount, the overall amount we're borrowing, we mentioned this formula as step 2 of the last question, part A. We said you just simply take the mortgage, and as long as we know what that means, we know that that means that's the amount we're borrowing. We're going to take the selling price and just subtract the down payment. Since we're putting the down payment towards the house cost, the leftover stuff is what we need to borrow to afford the house. So the selling price was $249,000 according to the original question, minus the down payment we found in Part A was $37,350. So go ahead and subtract that in your calculator. 249,000 minus 37,350, and you should be getting $211,650. And Part C, determine the cost of the 2 points that were paid by the Martins on their mortgage. So remember, usually points is optional. It's the bank says to the Martins, okay, if you can afford to put a little bit more towards the home, well, not towards the home, but if you can afford to put a little bit more at the time of closing down, and it's charged on the mortgage rather, then we will lower the interest rate that we charge you on that mortgage, which will essentially lower your monthly mortgage payment. And each point is a percent. So 2 points would be 2% of the mortgage. So as usual, let's convert 2% to a decimal. Any percent has to be converted to a pure decimal before I use it in any mathematical calculation in this chapter. So that's 2 hops to the left to go backwards from percent to decimal. 1, 2, and it becomes 0.02. Of means times. The mortgage says of the mortgage. Well, the mortgage was our answer to Part B. That was the $211,650. So we're doing 2% of $211,650 by multiplying. And when you multiply that out, you get $4,233. So the Martins, in addition to the down payment and all the other closing costs, are going to put down these 2 points to lower their interest rate. Example 3 says, suppose the Martins' gross monthly income is $7,250 and they have 23 remaining monthly payments of $225 on their car loan, 17 remaining monthly payments of $175 on their daughter's orthodontic braces, and 11 remaining monthly payments of $45 on a loan used to purchase new furniture. The property taxes and homeowners insurance on the house they wish to buy are $165 and $115 per month respectively. Their bank will approve a loan that has a total monthly mortgage payment of principal, interest, property taxes, and homeowners insurance that is less than or equal to 28% of their adjusted monthly income. Part A, determine 28% of the Martins' adjusted monthly income. I know it's a very wordy question, but it's not as bad as it looks. It's just about understanding what they're really asking of us. Most states, most counties within each state use what's called this 28% rule, where for whatever reason, financial advisors have decided that we can afford to spend 28% of our adjusted gross income on a house payment. So the theme of Part A is what is the maximum they can afford to spend on a house. That's what they mean whenever the homework asks you for 28% of the adjusted monthly income. So the maximum, I'll just abbreviate it max, they can afford on a house is what that question is really asking. So the numbers, because I know the question threw a lot of numbers at us, but the numbers that are going to be important then are dealing with the money they're bringing in, their gross income, and the debt they're paying out each month that they're obligated for a while to pay out. So first, step one, because it says 28% of the adjusted monthly income, let's figure out what that adjusted monthly income even is. I'll abbreviate it ADJ, adjusted monthly, equals. So you're just going to simply look at the first couple of sentences in these word problems and look up how much are they bringing in. Well, their gross, that's the amount before taxes, is $7,250. So take their monthly gross and subtract all of the monthly payments they're currently paying. And you would only consider payments where they have many months left to go. So that's why it's saying 23 remaining payments of this and 17 payments of that. But you're not actually going to use the numbers 23 or 17 in any calculation. It's just saying, okay, these are long-term loans and you got a lot of payments left on them. So I'm going to subtract the $225 that they're paying out for their car loan every month, because that's coming out of their gross income. Check. And I'm going to also subtract, let's see, the $175 is the next dollar amount I see. Again, I don't care about the 17 remaining months, so ignore the 17. Minus, ignore the 11 remaining months part, but I am paying out on 45 if I'm the Martins, $45 on a loan used to purchase new furniture. So all I'm doing for adjusted monthly income is taking the gross monthly income and subtracting all of their current monthly payments from that. So I'm doing $7,250 minus $225 minus $175 minus $45. And that leaves me with $6,805 after we subtract the adjustments, the current debt in other words. So now step 2, to get the final answer to part A, it says to do 28% of that adjusted monthly income. convert 28% to a decimal. It becomes 0.28. Of again means multiply, so times it by. The adjusted monthly we said in step 1 was $6,805. So I'm going to take that 0.28 times 6,805, and then it's just a matter of how far do they want you to round it. If they want you to round, let's say to the nearest cent this time, it comes up on my calculator as $1,905, and it says 0.4, so I need to add the 0 if I'm supposed to round to the nearest cent, meaning 2 digits out, so that'd be in 40 cents. So in other words, the Martins could afford to spend up to $1,905.40 on a house payment each month. So now Part B says the Martins want a 30-year, $211,650 mortgage. If the interest rate is 7%, determine the total monthly payment, including principal, interest, property taxes, and homeowners insurance for this mortgage. So the theme of B is different. The theme of B is just calculating, punching the numbers in for their desired home. So they found a home they like, and they want to know if they get that home, what would be their monthly mortgage payment. So step 1, it's not just what's the mortgage, how much are they borrowing, it's find the monthly payment. So the bad news is that means it's time to use that big old formula that we used on slide 1, that we used in the car video. I'll write it on the top of the screen. Payment equals the mortgage P times R over N over bracket 1 minus parenthesis 1 plus R over N raised to the negative NT power, close the bracket. That was that negative exponent formula. So the monthly payment, just keep in mind though that this formula only ever gives you the principal and the interest. So the monthly principal and interest payment is P, the mortgage. They tell you the mortgage, at least they were a little bit nicer than usual this time. We don't have to calculate the mortgage like we did in example 1. They literally say $211,650 mortgage. So that gets plugged into P. $211,650 times R, the interest rate. Convert 7% to a decimal. It becomes 0.07 because you move the decimal point 2 hops to the left. All the ends are 12 because it's the number of times you pay a year. Well, if it's a monthly payment, ends are 12. All over, bracket 1 minus, parenthesis 1 plus, R again, so another 0.07. Over another n is 12, raise it to the negative, another n for another 12, times t, the time in years. This is a 30-year mortgage. I'm going to do the exponent first before I put the whole thing into the calculator as usual. So negative 12 times 30 for negative 360 is my exponent. Now it's time to put that into the calculator. I'm going to need to create some room, so you might want to pause this video real quick and jot these numbers down because I'm about to erase the numbers to create some room. But this is what I'm going to be typing into the calculator here in a second. So we said this time the mortgage was $211,650, parentheses, 0.07, decimals on the bottom row there, divided by, all the ends are 12 whenever it says monthly for the car or the house stuff, divided by, I'm going to use parenthesis for bracket, 1 minus another left parenthesis, 1 plus 0.07 divided by 12, close the inner parentheses, up arrow for exponent, negative on the bottom row, 360 was the exponent, hit the right arrow key, and don't forget to close the denominator. So instead of the bracket, I just used another right parenthesis. We'll do the job. I hit enter, and let's pretend it said round to the nearest cent again, so that's 2 digits out. Since the third digit is a 2, I'm going to round down, meaning keep it the same, so 11 cents, 1408.11. So we said the monthly payment of principal and interest alone is approximately $1,408.11. However, we're not done yet because it did say to now include for the first time property taxes and homeowners insurance. Well, the original question gave you those numbers, so we'll just simply add them to our monthly payment. So we said the monthly payment, $1,408.11, and this is for principal and interest. Plus, if we look back around the middle-ish of the original problem, it says the property taxes and homeowners insurance on the house they wish to buy, so they're not paying this money currently, this is their dream home here that they want to buy, are $165 and $115 per month respectively. So that means the property taxes are $165. I'll just write taxes for property taxes. Plus, we said the homeowner's insurance was $115. So $115, I'll just write insurance. This one did not mention there's also a mortgage insurance that they force you to buy if you generally make a smaller down payment than 20%. But they didn't mention it in the homework, so we're not going to worry about it here. So let's just simply add up all the numbers. 1408.11 plus 165 plus the 115 gives us a grand total of a monthly payment, when our bill comes in the mail there, of $1,688.11 would be that total monthly payment on their mortgage for this house that they're interested in buying. So all of part B, the theme was the cost, I'll just put off to the side, of the house they want to buy. They're not making any of these payments yet. So I just put cost of house in parentheses. So part C says, determine whether the Martins qualify for this mortgage. So just a simple yes or no answer. And again, it's just a matter of understanding what our answers for A and B really meant. So we said part A was how much they could afford to spend on a house. So they could afford to spend $19.05.40. That's what they can afford on their house. Part B, we said that represented the total monthly cost of the house, which was $16.88.11. And you just simply look up which number is bigger to answer part C. So clearly, in this case, the $19.05.40 is larger than $1,688.11. I'll write a little greater than symbol in the middle here. So because what they can afford is more than the cost of the house, that means the final answer to C is yes. They would qualify for that mortgage because what they can afford is greater than the cost of the house they're interested in buying. Clearly, if it were the reverse scenario, if the cost of the house was more than what the bank says they can afford, then the final answer would be no to part C.